Well, good afternoon. You are watching ThinkTech's Likable Science, and as you probably know, the host of that program is a Mr. Ethan Allen, and I'm not Ethan Allen, I'm David Day. And so what we've done here at ThinkTech is we've decided that we're going to pull Ethan in and talk a little bit more about what it is that he does and his connection with the whole concept of likable science. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you the normal host for this program, Mr. Ethan Allen. And Ethan, nice to have you on your own show.
Well, thank you, David. It's a pleasure to be guesting here.
Well, it's a different situation being in the guest seat as opposed to the host seat. And
it is. It's an easier role.
It is. You know, before we get underway here, Ethan, I just want to let everybody know that you are the director of the STEM program at PREL. And STEM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, and Math.
Exactly.
So you're the kind of the geek guy there at PREL, right?
I suppose you could say that.
Okay, all right. And PREL, what's the full name of that organization?
So PREL stands for Pacific Resources for Education and Learning. And it's about a 20-year-old nonprofit. The REL part of it you may recognize from other education names. It used to be part of the Regional Education Laboratory Network, the RELs, and PREL was the 10th REL formed, the last of the regional education labs.
But PREL is based here in Hawaii, is it not?
Yes, right here. Our main office is right upstairs here.
Okay, and without, just for our audience members who probably don't know, what is it that this organization really does?
So PREL is basically all about, as our mission statement says, enhancing community well-being through partnerships in education.
Okay.
So we work with anyone and everyone concerned with education really throughout the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. So that's Hawaii, it's the 3 U.S. territories of American Samoa, Guam, and the Commonwealth of the Northern Marianas, and it's the 3 freely associated states of the Republic of the Marshall Islands, the Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of Palau. Those are all have U.S. affiliations in various ways.
Okay.
And PREL works with everyone from the big state education agencies in these groups down to individual classrooms and teachers on a variety of different education issues, on everything from leadership to language issues, dual language. It's a huge problem in some of these areas, to STEM, science, technology, math, trying to very much work collaboratively with these entities to help them build capacities to create education systems that support their people and enable them to move ahead here while sort of preserving and honoring the cultures that they come from.
Okay, so you know that's a fabulous mission, and so let's help the audience visualize that a little bit. Let's say I'm a history teacher, and I'm based in Agana, Guam, as an example. And so my salary and my school, it's all public. It's funded by the Guamanian government. All right. So I'm a public employee, and PREL is a private, nonprofit organization, right?
Right.
And so, where does PREL get its funds from?
A variety of sources. PREL for many years had huge support from the Department of Education, the U.S. Department of Education. They support their regional lab network quite well, and PREL had that support for many years. We still get some funding from them. We have funding from the National Science Foundation. We get funding from various other grant sources. We also do a lot of contract work. So for instance, in Guam, I'm currently involved in some contracts helping Guam develop standards-based assessments. They're doing this for science, for math, for social sciences, and for English language arts. So we help them, we work with groups of teachers and their education leaders to help them craft assessments that are based around their standards, to look at the data from running pilots on these assessments, adjust these, and develop good, workable assessments for them.
So coming back to my example now, as a history teacher, for example, on Guam, basically, I look over my shoulder and I've got PREL there to support as something like a public-private partnership, a little bit.
Something like that, yes. We contract with Guam for these assessments. We've worked with other entities on helping them actually craft the standards that their students are expected to meet. We also will work if entities want to, for instance, work with a cadre of principals and do a principal leadership series of workshops or professional learning opportunities. We will come in and help them do that. We will provide all kinds of resources. As a history teacher, for example, you might find yourself in the position of teaching some Hawaiian history, right?
Right, right.
And you could just go to a website, Aho Mau. If you just Google Aho Mau, you'll find this. There are 3 animated videos that PREL did. This one on Pele finds a home, Pele searches for a home, Maui snares the sun, and the Menehune and the birds. Each of these has a video, an animated video, about 15 or 20 minutes, wonderful, very high quality. They've got these so-called graphic novels that go with them that essentially tell the story.
Terrific.
With this. They then have science behind them. So for Pele finds a home, searches for a home, we have volcanoes. And again, a lot of interesting stuff about volcanoes, all in Hawaii. Stuff on earthquakes related to volcanoes, and again, stuff on waves. All of these related to sort of the geology behind.
I mean, this is
that's all available.
This is fascinating.
It's on their website. It's free. You can download this stuff. You can print them out. You can watch the videos. So teachers, as a history teacher, you could access that kind of resource very easily.
Now, and as a history teacher here in Hawaii.
Oh yeah,
same.
Anyone around the world can access this particular piece of it. Yeah, no, this is.
All right. So let me try a different way of thinking about PREL that maybe helps our audience.
Sure.
One step further. And as I listen to you, Ethan, the whole mission and intellectual development that PREL is providing, it's almost like a think tank support group for education out here in the Pacific. Something like that.
That's an interesting way to put it. I hadn't heard that, but yes, we try very much to partner with these entities. We come in and talk to them and say, what is it you need? What's going to be the most help?
Right.
What approach do you want to use this? We don't try to come in and say, here's a package, here's our solution. We work with them very much recognizing they need to build up the capacity. They have been under-resourced in lots of ways. In my own particular work, I look and I see that the STEM teaching workforce, the science teachers, often don't have the background they need to teach science. They don't have the equipment they need to teach science. They don't have the books they need to teach science. So there's lots of needs there. There's lots of interesting wealth of resources too. These islanders have survived for eons on these small islands out of being tremendously resourceful people, learning, for instance, to predict the weather, knowing when storms are coming, being able to prepare for those, cope with them, adapt to having their islands washed over in some cases by waves.
Right.
They have colonized the Pacific, which is an amazing feat if you think about the navigation involved in that.
Absolutely.
And that kind of knowledge needs to be preserved and brought into the realm of sort of modern science. Modern science should not wash over that stuff. The two should sort of synergize.
Well, one of the things that I think that is very, very important here is that, there is, in listening to you, what I'm the appreciation that I'm gaining for kind of the whole mission and approach that PREL has is that it is providing a intellectual underpinnings for education that has a specific perspective from the standpoint of the history and culture of the Pacific Islands, and so that this is a very unique organization.
Well, yes, it is. It's very odd in the sense that we go out into a place like Chuuk and find the children there using textbooks, science textbooks that talk about temperate climate zones and talk about the snow melting in the spring. And to a child on Chuuk, this means nothing.
Of course.
They've never seen snow. They don't know about the wolves and the rabbits and those cycles, ecological links. We try to work with them and bring examples to them from their own area. So We work with other groups in islands, partner with them, and develop very locally relevant, very place-based education. That's one of the current phrases we talk about. Education really is very contextually dependent. What you learn depends on where you live, who you know, what your role there is. And we try very much to be very, as much as possible, attuned to that and work within that context. So yes, we do try to very much tailor our approach to the people who we work with.
As all of us think about this, I mean, one of the things that in thinking more about your comment of modern science, the technology washing over the Pacific Islands, one of the things that I've noticed, and I don't in some of our school children, time to time, is because they, and this is true here in Hawaii, and I've traveled to Guam and Saipan. I've seen some of this. Is that sometimes in the kids you see a kind of a less than. It's like they some of the kids, because they're not in the heart of the technology, the development of things like that, they sort of feel that they're not okay, or they're behind. I don't know how you want to phrase it, but it's a it impacts when they're studying about various topics. If the teachers are not bringing out the value of their own background, their own history, their own culture, and they're always talking about something else, it almost is saying, this is what's important and you're not as important. And that's how you develop a lack of self-esteem or something like that. And so this whole process, it seems to me, is a fantastic self-esteem builder for the young students out in the Pacific Islands, as well as our own students here in Hawaii.
Absolutely, you're right. There is this common deficit model sort of thinking. These people need this. They have nothing. We must provide resources, and that's a very unhealthy model to get into. It's the same sort of patriarchal thinking of outreach programs where I know what you need, and therefore I give you what you need.
Right.
Instead, we try to look from sort of an asset-based approach and think, no, these people have a rich culture, they have a rich history, they have a great deal of knowledge. The classic example is if you were dropped down in the middle of the Australian desert, how long do you think you could last? An Australian Aborigine can do that just fine. They know what that is. They understand. They have the knowledge. They might have trouble being dropped down in New York City, but yes. So this is very much working with them to help promote their cultures. There are very ugly remnants of colonialism still going on, where much of the teaching in these places happens in English. So you have the situation of having teachers who never really learned English very well, teaching complex subjects in English to students who don't speak English really except in the classroom. You can sort of see where that can break down really quickly.
It's called a non-starter.
Right. So we're trying, for instance, to work with these groups to say, look, Chuukese is a wonderful language. It's a powerful language. Teach Chuukese. Help your kids master that, learn its nuances, become fluent in that, truly fluent, and in English at the same time. Don't have kids who learn a little bit of English and a little bit of Chuukese, but don't learn either of them well. Instead, really build fluency in both languages together, so they can reinforce each other, and the kids become truly better prepared to be global citizens then.
One of the corollaries to Murphy's Law, Ethan, is that you're entitled to ask one kind of less than thoroughly enlightened question a day. And so let me invoke my privilege here and ask one less than thoroughly enlightened question for today, and that is, as you've painted this broad brush picture of PREL, my question is, are there other foundations and organizations that do this, or is PREL kind of the Lone Ranger?
There are lots of other organizations that we work with that have similar goals, work on similar pieces of things we work at. I don't know of any other group that really sort of takes the broad view that we do of sort of Pacific education as a whole, and says we are committed to Pacific education, Pacific Islands education, and we want to promote and better that whole system. There are groups, as I say, we work with people who educate in certain areas, either doing climate education work. There's a tremendous interest in that field these days. There are people doing environmental education. There are groups, working on various different kinds of programs. But PREL does sort of have a fairly unique niche. They've been around for 22 years now, roughly, and really have been working very hard and accomplishing really remarkable things in a lot of areas.
An amazing organization. And we have an amazing program for you. We're going to be talking about some other topics relating to what this whole notion of likable science is all about and how it fits into the PREL mission when we come back after the break.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Amashta, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And Urban Transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
We're back. You're watching Likable Science with Ethan Allen. He's the host, but here's the problem. I'm not Ethan Allen. What we did here at ThinkTech is when we found out more about what it is that the host of the regular show is really all about, we decided to shove him into the guest capacity and let me have a chance to talk with him. And I'm David Day, and so here's your regular host, Ethan Allen, and he's on the hot seat today.
Good to be here.
And if you've just joined us, we were talking about before the break this whole wonderful organization here in Hawaii called PREL. And Ethan is the director of the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics group at PREL, and that is called the STEM program. And Ethan has a particular interest in science and education, and that is this whole notion of likable science, which is what this program is all about. Right. And so, Ethan, let's talk about the whole theme of likable science. Sure. What does that mean?
Well, scientists have a rather odd rep in the world, and it's been quite consistent over the years. Scientists are actually pretty well trusted by the American public, but particularly kids have a very odd view of science. There is a classic draw a scientist activity where you ask kids to draw what they think of as a scientist.
Okay.
And they routinely draw the same.
Looks like Albert Einstein, right?
Wild hair, stuff in a lab coat and stuff stuck in a pocket.
Breakfast is all spilled all over the front of the shirt, thick glasses, right?
Okay. Very typical. Okay. And throughout school, then, people get scared of science. They get sort of, science is presented as this sort of temple of knowledge, big, heavy facts, and of a very fixed way of thinking, and also of being very the territory of smart people, And none of that's true, right?
Science. Well, wait, more than just territory of smart people. It's the territory of people who are both smart and don't relate to anybody else.
Well, yes.
They're kind of in their own little world, okay?
Right, exactly. So my sort of a little personal mission, as you might think of it, for years has been to try to help people understand that's not what science is about. Science is about a way of sort of thinking, a way of looking at the world, a way of understanding things. When you go and click on a lamp in your room and it doesn't go on, what do?
Panic.
Well, no, you don't panic. You do things, you maybe check the switch again, you maybe check the light bulb, switch out the light bulb, check to see if it's plugged in. You've made a hypothesis or an observation, light hasn't gone on, or hypothesis, maybe I didn't turn the switch right. Maybe I got to turn that switch again. Maybe the bulb needs to be screwed in tighter. Maybe the bulb needs to be replaced. These are all hypotheses
Right.
that you're going and you're testing out. It's a very rational, scientific way of thinking. You don't turn around and try to propitiate the gods, as it were, by making burnt offerings to some mysterious god of the light. You actually have a fairly rational approach to fixing your light bulb. Science is very much a part of all of our lives. And it should be appreciated. People don't sort of think of that kind of stuff as being science, but it really is. And so I just try to bring in, sort of take that to the next step and help people understand that things like I guess last week was a forensic scientist who looks at death and decaying organisms and all. And I hope I made that more accessible to more people, help them understand why you would do that, what's the value in it, how he goes about it.
And that was a terrific show. That was a terrific show.
Well, thank you. We've had guests on here talking about a new microscope that this gentleman has invented, where it's a little fold-up microscope, little printed on paper. You fold the whole thing up, can stick it in your pocket. It costs 50 cents to make. It's a 2,000 power microscope. Amazing. Very accessible, and his tool makes science very accessible. When you can build a microscope for 50 cents, every kid can carry one in their pocket. And suddenly, you've opened up a whole new realm of microscopy to every student in the world, basically. So, I try to further this idea that science should not be relegated off to the lab. Science should be something that everyone thinks about. They see the fun in it. They see the challenges, the excitement, the interesting things, Why, when you spill your cup of coffee and you look at the coffee stains, they aren't uniform. You'll see all your coffee stains are always darker on one edge, and they
But why
pale
is
back out.
that, by the way? I've always wondered that.
Well, it has to do with how actually, as the liquid is evaporating, what's happening, the molecular motion is gradually pushing the grains of coffee together into the smaller and smaller piece of water that is left, basically. So,
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did you know that? I didn't know that.
So no, it's all around. Everything you look at, you can ask, why does it happen that way? And I try to, kids do that. Your 2-year-olds, your 3-year-olds, routinely. That's their big word, right? Why?
One of the things I've noticed as a parent, and I'm sure some of you in the audience have noticed as well, is that as a child is going up through an educational process, circling back to your earlier comment, Ethan, that the scientist is always seen, or often seen, as somebody who is, oftentimes intellectually remote or untouchable. It's the temple, the bubble kind of concept. And what happens is that the child is introduced to science, hopefully at a relatively young age, in terms of the teachers. So we're talking about elementary school and junior high. And boy, in my experience as a parent, what happens is that if the kid gets the wrong kind of teacher in those formative stages, what happens is that's it for science. I can't do it. It's not for me. It's there's all these other people much smarter than me, and it's easy to there's almost like a downshift in self-confidence.
Very, very much so. Many elementary teachers are very poorly prepared in science. They've taken very little science in college. They are uncomfortable that they learn science from typically often not a good teacher, or else they would have probably pursued science. Therefore, they sort of reflect that back in their teaching. They don't tend to teach science well. They teach lists of vocabulary, or they gloss over it. If the kid questions them, that often actually makes a teacher feel threatened, because they don't know it, and they don't like that, and therefore they shut the kid down in various ways. Instead, we try, for instance, to encourage teachers to regard science as a mutual exploration. You, as a teacher, and your students together look at phenomena and try to learn more about them, try to understand why this is. What are the factors that make some plants grow taller than others? If you put multiple specimens of the same plant out in identical pots with the same amount of water, why do some grow better than others? Do some get better lighting, or some more in and out of the wind, or some getting a little more water, or what is it? There's nothing. You don't have to really know a whole lot of science to teach science well. You just really have to have curiosity. You have to embodied attitudes of science, really, much more than knowing the facts of science.
Well, as I'm listening to you, one of the things that I'm thinking here is that the really superb science teacher, the Rolls-Royce types, yes, they have to know the facts, they have to know the science, and that's a given. Mm-hmm. But what you're actually describing, Ethan, is an ability which I think a lot of science teachers come up short in, because it's not that easy to do, is to communicate through that bubble in a way that particular kid can really understand it and get it. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. There's a new set of science standards out called the Next Generation Science Standards. And they've done something rather nice. A lot of traditional science standards focus on the content of science. These next generation science standards have 3 dimensions, one of which is content, one of which is things called cross-cutting concepts. But the third one is the practices of science. And they insist sort of that at every stage, kids be sort of doing what it is that scientists do, asking questions, making hypotheses, taking data, doing observations, thinking, recording your observations, talking to people about what it is you've seen and why you think this might be, checking out alternative possibilities. This kind of thing, that's absolutely central to these new standards, and it's a very healthy trend, because again, it sort of says, yes, the content has its place and is very important, but these processes are very, very critical to learning to think like a scientist and act like a scientist, and bring that sort of fundamental science literacy into your life.
Let's take, Ethan, let's take this whole concept of likable science now and move it into the work that you do as the director of the STEM program at PREL. And before we get into maybe a specific case study, and let's give the audience kind of the big mission picture, how you take the whole concept that you described of likable science and fit that into the PREL mission.
Well, sure. So the point then isn't to just say to a kid, here's a periodic table, memorize this. The point much more is to say to a child, for instance, yes, look at your island. Notice, why do you think these mangroves that were growing on one coast are no longer growing there? What's happening here? And what are the effects of the mangroves no longer being there? Are you seeing more storm waves wash in further along the coast? Are you seeing this kind of change? What might be, what's happening with your weather patterns, for instance? It used to be that your breadfruit grew at a certain time of year. Now you're seeing perhaps it's growing at different times of year. These kind of scientific facts, if you will, that are much more relevant, they're place-based, they're contextually appropriate to these kids. You can then go in and point out, yes, there may be changes, perhaps as the salt water has washed through the soil, the plants are now getting toxins they shouldn't get. Maybe their mineral nutrition is actually changing, and you can certainly get into the chemistry if you wish. But there's a real need to keep science meaningful, focused on the learner's life. So it's things that mean something. So it's not just this arbitrary, again, teaching a Marshallese student about glaciers without really bringing it in some appropriate way is very ineffective. They have no clue about a glacier. They have nothing to connect that to.
So no need to spend a whole lot of time on Groundhog Day.
Right, exactly.
You can see, ladies and gentlemen, why Friday afternoons here at ThinkTech, you do want to tune into this program, Likable Science, with Ethan here. This is an opportunity for you to really get inside the mind of the host, and you'll see why this theme of making science relevant, likable, and understandable is really terrific, and makes for not only good education but also terrific entertainment.
Well, thank you.
Let's do this. Let's go to a specific case study having to do with water, because that's something that involves all of the Pacific Islands. And so, control room, if you could bring up our first picture here, and let's talk about maybe the concept Well, use this whole thing, this whole notion of water resources and its sustainability as kind of as a way to get you, Ethan, to help explain to our audience how this whole particular perspective of the PREL organization in assisting the students in the Pacific Islands here in Hawaii to understand science, how it really works. And so let's use this as an example.
Sure. So the idea behind this Water for Life project is that water, by its very nature, is a very key element in all of our lives. But even more than for all of us who depend on water, it is particularly critical in Pacific Islanders' lives. They live on small pieces of land surrounded by water. In many, many cases, they depend upon rainwater to get drinking water. Water is really central to their lives, and so it becomes a very good hook, as it were, the attachment point to science. So once you begin to understand that water is important to people's lives, you can then begin to ask questions about the properties of water, and that can begin to get you into sort of the physics and chemistry of water.
Sure.
And so in this way, we sort of contextualize it. So because of the changing weather patterns that are happening, a lot of places like the Marshall Islands are going through longer and more severe droughts than they used to. So it's necessary for them to be building up better water supplies. They have very limited groundwater in the Marshall, so building more rainwater catchment systems, maintaining the rainwater catchment systems, cleaning them out, keeping the water clean and pure are all critical aspects of a healthy community. And so again, we try to do this, and it ties right back into this. This is science, but it's also, it's good social things to go around and monitor your water, test your water quality, see that your water is good. If it isn't, think about draining that tank, refilling it, cleaning it out, whatever's needed.
So what is this whole system? How does this Water for Life program really work?
So this is all funded by the National Science Foundation. Yay for them.
Okay.
And they gave me about a year and a half ago a 5-year grant to take this program to 4 different sites. The Republic of Palau, the Republic of the Marshall Islands, and then 2 of the states, Chuuk and Yap, in the Federated States of Micronesia. And in each site, we've set up what I call core teams. We have PREL staff members there who actually help as key liaisons, but then at each site, I've tried to get at least 1 or 2 people from an education community, either a school system or higher education, 1 or 2 people from like a water system community, people who actually deal with water or wastewater treatment or providing water, and 1 or 2 people from sort of the environmental NGO community, EPA, National Weather Service, that kind of group, and get these groups talking together. One of the key problems in these areas, U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands, is they don't have an informal science education structure, infrastructure. That is, anywhere in the U.S. you can hop in your car and drive to a zoo or a museum or a botanic garden or whatever. There's nothing like that in any of these places. So I'm trying to help get these people together and figuring among those 3 communities, educators, the water systems people, and the environmental community, they can maybe provide some of this community-based science education and help their communities find and access science a little bit better around this theme of water that's so important to them.
Let's talk a little bit about the current real project you got underway here.
Sure. So we have very different projects. This has been driven, again, by the individual core teams in these sites. I didn't come in and tell these people what they're going to do. So it's played out very differently in each site. In the Marshall Islands, for instance, they are working on how our schools are providing water to their students. And they've recently actually mandated that schools have a clear stated plan in place and clearly provide adequate drinking water for their students. So we're helping them now. We're going through analyzing the schools. How are they providing water? How much water do they provide? How can we do a better job of that? Do they need to repair an existing rainwater catchment system, drain it out, clean out a tank, put new guttering in, whatever?
Okay.
Do they need to truck in water? Do they need to set up a desalination system? What do they need? In Chuk, we're looking at a very different situation. A landowner there has a spring that provides very good quality fresh water. Is happy to share it with the community, but community members have to truck onto their land to get this water. They're not so happy with that.
Okay.
So we're going to help them build a little catchment system for their spring and then pipe it about 200 yards down to the coast and put in a tap. So that fresh water will also, as well as being accessible to the family there, will also be accessible free to the public, and they'll be able to get it without having to essentially trespass on the family's land. In Yap, we're working with things called first flush diverters. When you have rainwater catchment systems, if it hasn't rained for a while, your roof typically has a lot of debris on it,
Right.
leaves, bird droppings,
Sure.
etc. The first rain that comes washes all this stuff into your gutters and washes it down towards your rainwater catchment system. You don't really
Yuck.
want all that stuff in it.
Oh, gosh.
So a first flush diverter is a system where it takes that first 10 minutes or 10 gallons or whatever of water and separates it, runs into a separate container, and then blocks that and lets the now clean rainwater that's coming off your now washed off roof.
This is fascinating stuff. This is fascinating
that
stuff.
goes into your rainwater system. It keeps your water cleaner, stops the contamination. And in Palau, we're working with some of the school systems there on doing outdoor education, helping young kids understand how on a small island they get their water. Where does their water come from? How the very makeup of the island shapes their access to water, and help them really understand, so they'll learn, they'll become good stewards of their land and stewards of their water.
You know, this is fascinating. And control room, let's come back into the studio here for a moment. What we're going to do, Ethan, is take a short break here. We've got some commercial sponsors that want to elbow their way in here, and let's let them do that. But when we come back, let's continue with this water quality, this Water for Life project, and talk a little bit about the Pacific Islands Climate Education Partnership and what that's all about. And you're going to want to stick around for that. And I'm David Day. We're here shoving Ethan Allen out of the way. You're watching Likable Science here at ThinkTech, and we'll see you on the other side of the break.
I'm Hong Jiang, host for Asia in Review on Tuesdays.
And I'm David Day, host for Asian Review on Thursdays. Both of us broadcast our respective shows at 4 p.m.
And my topics tend to deal with questions related to environment, culture, history, and sometimes human rights.
And my shows tend to be on international business, foreign policy, geopolitics, and national security. And you can watch our shows live on the ThinkTech website at thinktechhawaii.com.
And you can also watch us on YouTube or Olalo.
So come join us on Thursdays at 4 p.m. I'm David Day.
And on Tuesdays at 4 p.m., I'm Hong Jiang.
Aloha.
Aloha.
We're back. You're watching Likable Science with Ethan Allen, named after either some fabulous early American furniture or tremendous American patriots during the Revolutionary War, or neither, right? Welcome, Ethan.
I am actually a collateral descendant of Ethan Allen of the Green Mountain Boy fame, yes.
And that's Vermont,
Yes,
right?
exactly. And Ethan Allen was indeed a revolutionary patriot who played a rather pivotal role in the American Revolution. You know.
Isn't this amazing? We've got a son of the American Revolution right here in this program. And one of the great sayings in Vermont, which relates to this program, is, you know, if you're up in Vermont and you ask one of the farmers how to get from point A to point B, oftentimes they've got this great accent. They'll say, "You can't get there from here." And so that's kind of like science in some people's minds. You can't get there from here.
Right.
And but let's go back if you just joined the program here. This is Likable Science, and right before the break, we were talking about a kind of a case study that the PREL organization that Ethan is with has developed. Just as an example of the type of educational, real-life programs that PREL is involved with here in the Pacific Islands. And we were talking about various current projects in the Republic of the Marshall Islands, Chuk and Yap, and on Palau. But let's go back to our pictures for a moment. Well, I guess we won't. at the moment because I've lost it for a second here. I wanted to talk a little bit about the Pacific Islands, this climate education partnership.
Sure.
And so maybe Ethan, if you will kind of get started with that, I can repair our picture thing, and we'll be back on it here. But
Sure.
talk a little bit about that, if you would.
Sure. So the Pacific Islands Climate Education Partnership, or PCEP as we call it, is one of 6 National Science Foundation funded climate education partnerships. So these are groups that are dealing with this really pressing cultural issue of climate education. How do we deal with and adapt to and mitigate the challenges of changing climates? And while in the mainland US there are still an unfortunately large number of people, including a really unfortunate number of politicians, who deny the reality of climate change.
Hold you 1 second there. Let's
Sure.
go, Mr. Producer, if you could throw up there. We were back. We're live. Okay, so we're now on climate education. Okay, so politicians.
All right. So in the Pacific Islands, people recognize that climate change is real. They have seen its impacts already. You can go into some of these islands and see where traditional graveyards are now out in the ocean, or people will point to a small hammock of land off of it and say, yes, my family used to own all this land in here, and we farmed taro here.
Okay.
And now it isn't land anymore, it's ocean. You know, they understand sea level is rising, and they see the impacts of that every day. Storms come and wash over land, contaminate their very narrow little freshwater aquifers, and again, disrupt agriculture. They see that. They feel those impacts. The climate that used to be so beautifully predictable, there were dry seasons and wet seasons. Dry seasons and wet seasons followed one another in a very regular pattern. No more. They'll have droughts now that are much more extended, much more severe than they used to be. They'll have intensive storms come in and hit them harder than storms used to. So there's a need for these communities to adjust to this and adapt to it and mitigate these damages. They can do some things. They can plant mangroves to help hold their shorelines in. They can build better water catchment systems to catch and hold more drinking water to see them through the droughts. They can perhaps do raised taro beds instead of the in-ground taro. There are a number of things that the groups can do, and they are doing. And we, along with many, many partners for the PCEP, are helping them do this. This is a very large program. It involves all 11 of the jurisdictions in the U.S. affiliated Pacific Islands. That is Hawaii, the 3 territories, and the 3 freely associated states, including the 4 separate states within that. And many, many different organizations, 70 plus different organizations now work in various aspects of this. So we work with people in the Southern Hemisphere who are doing very similar work, because the small island states in the Southern Hemisphere are facing exactly the same issues. They are having rising sea levels. They are having a change in their weather patterns. You know? So again, this is all couched. We don't particularly talk to them about the changes in Superstorm Sandy and what that did to New York City, because that means very little to somebody sitting in Vanuatu. You know, but they know, they're seeing it, and we try to work with them on what it is they can do about it, how they can cope with it, how they can adapt to it, how they can try to slow down the changes in their islands.
Let me go to the last picture here, Mr. Producer, for a second. You know, this resilience for climate change, the building thereof. What does that really mean?
Well, you know, communities are resilient, more or less resilient, and their resilience depends on a lot of things, but these communities have a great deal of culture behind them. For instance, the Marshall Islands, people have lived there for 2,000, 3,000 years. Many of the people who live there today have lived there. Their grandparents lived there. Their grandparents' grandparents, and their grandparents before them lived on the Marshalls. Yet, those people's, certainly their grandchildren, are not going to live there. The Marshalls are not going to be inhabitable in 40 to 60 years.
And why is that?
The sea level is rising. The Marshalls are a very, very low-lying set of islands. They have to figure out, what are they going to do? Where are they going to move? How can they preserve key elements of their culture and take their culture with them? They are a seafaring group. You know, they have traditionally moved around a good deal. They're probably going to do that some more. It's a very complex, nuanced question. But for many groups on higher islands, yes, their island won't disappear, but they're going to have to adjust. The lowlands on the island will disappear. They will turn into water. So that people have to move up the island. So have to figure out new ways to farm, build new roads, build new communities, make these adjustments, try to protect their shorelines as best they can. So there are many aspects that involve not just pure science, but involve technology, involve engineering, involve mathematics. They involve social questions too. How, if you have a small community living on a small low island, how much is that worth? When should they move to a higher island within that same country? And what is that going to cost them? What is the cultural trade-offs there?
Okay.
Yeah.
You know, you mentioned something very interesting here that the residents of the low-lying Pacific Islands, they have observed over generations a change in the sea level, and that is what some equate to. They tie that into some change in overall climate over a period of time, and I suppose that's true with other kinds of things, you know, loss of reefs or certain fish, wildlife, and so forth like that. But you did mention made a reference to a political side, and this whole notion of climate change, in just focusing now on the Pacific Islands, is there a political overlay to this?
Well, there is. It seems to me that deserves a very secondary standing because there's a fundamental cultural, humanitarian primary layer to it. But how you choose to react to it is a matter to some extent of politics. How much you choose to sort of fight it, how strongly you choose to try to mitigate the damages it's inflicting versus how much you just simply try to walk away from those damages. Those are political decisions. Do you repair your coastline road and keep repairing it as it gets washed out, or do you invest in building a new road inland at higher elevation? You cannot get away from the politics of it. And these are questions that these communities are grappling with all the time now. And none of the decisions are easy.
And what about on the, because your Kuleana area of expertise is in the STEM program, and science, technology, engineering, mathematics. In terms of the Pacific Islands, is there a controversy amongst scientists as to what's actually happening and why it's happening, or not?
Not really. People pretty much agree. There's very interesting variability because of both short-term cycles like the El Nino and La Nina effect, where water for a few months or a year the sea gets pushed up or pulled away more or less from certain spots in the Pacific.
And the technical term for that is the slosh factor, right?
Exactly. And yes, the ocean sloshes one way or sloshes the other way. And surprisingly, that can be actually very substantial differences. And so there's those effects. There are longer-term cycles too that happen where things change gradually over time. Then there are the sort of human-imposed changes that are being dumped onto that too. And but fundamentally, there's a pretty steady upward creep of sea level in the Pacific over the last particularly few decades, and it shows no signs of stopping. And people pretty much realize it. The folks in Kiribati are actually looking at buying old oil drilling rigs and anchoring them off of their islands so that as their islands disappear, they will still have sort of a presence there, a permanent presence, and can enforce their fishing rights, their mineral mining rights, et cetera, and maintain themselves. But they're going to face interesting legal questions when the last piece of land disappears. Has the country gone? Is the country gone from the United Nations just because it has no land anymore?
You know, we are out of time here, Ethan, and I want to thank you for allowing us here at ThinkTech to push you out of your wonderful position as a host on Likable Science, your program, and talking with our audience about what it is that you really do in this incredible effort to translate science so that the children of tomorrow can really understand and appreciate it. And thank you for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, David. I very much appreciate your stepping in here and taking on the host role and letting me tell people a little bit about what it is we do. And you did a top-notch job, and I very much appreciate it.
Well, that's all the time we have, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you learned something, and you might check out the PREL website at prel.org for some of those fabulous animated videos about teaching science to the children of the Pacific Islands. And stay tuned, same time, same place, next week for Ethan Allen's Likable Science. Good afternoon.